The storm hit just before sundown on September 15th, 1885. Thunder rolled low across the Arizona Valley, not violent, just tired like an old man clearing his throat after a lifetime of speaking hard truths. Cole Whitlock stood at the edge of his barn, watching dark clouds stretch their fingers across the western sky. The scent of rain clung to the air like old grief, familiar and unavoidable. He was 59 years old. His back had started to complain about mornings. His hands carried scars from barbed wire rope burn and one poorly aimed hammer strike in 1872. His face was weathered leather creased by decades of Arizona sun, but his eyes were still sharp pale blue against tan skin, and they never missed much. A calf was missing. He had counted them twice. 7 in the north paddock, 3 by the mesquite trees, but the smallest one, a speckled heifer born too early and barely strong enough to stand, had not come in with the rest. Cole muttered under his breath, grabbed his rope from the barn wall, and set out toward the gulch. His boots sank into the soft dirt as wind cut sharp through the sagebrush. Somewhere behind him, the barn door banged open and shut in the rising gusts. He did not look back. Every storm felt like a warning these days. Maybe because Margaret had died in one 16 years back. Maybe because the quiet afterward always settled too deep in his bones, a silence that reminded him how alone a man could be in a house built for two. He found the calf near the dry creek bed trembling and wedged under a twisted branch. Mud caked its legs. Its breathing was shallow ribs fluttering like a hummingbird's wings. Cole lowered to one knee. His joints popped and protested, but his hands stayed steady. He pulled the branch aside, scooped the calf into his arms, and rose slow. The animal bleated softly against his chest. The first drops fell just as he turned for home. They were not heavy, not yet, but he felt it in the wind, the kind of rain that came fast, flash flooding the dry veins of the land without warning. Red Creek might be bone dry 9 months of the year, but when it ran like vengeance, carrying away anything foolish enough to stand in its path. By the time he reached the barn, his shirt clung to him, and the calf's soft cries were barely audible over the drumming rain on the tin roof. He settled it on dry straw, covering it with a wool blanket and whispering whatever words he could summon. Words did not fix much, but sometimes they helped things not feel so alone. He stayed there for a while, letting the thunder roll overhead, remembering another storm 19 years ago, when the world had been different and Margaret had still been alive. When the rain finally eased to a steady patter, night had fallen. The world outside was slick with moonlight on wet dirt puddles reflecting stars like scattered diamonds. Cole stepped out under the awning and lit a cigarette, his boots squelching in the mud. He inhaled deep, let the smoke settle in his lungs, and that was when he saw her. A horse approached slowly from the south trail, silhouetted by the rising moon. Its rider did not rush. Whoever they were, they knew where they were going. Cole's hand drifted to the handle of his old Colt Peacemaker, out of habit more than fear. The gun had been on his hip since 1873, a .45 caliber companion that had seen him through range disputes, rattlesnake encounters, and one very tense conversation with a cattle thief in 1881. Strangers did not just show up at Cottonwood Creek Ranch, especially not women riding alone after a storm. The horse stopped at the gate. The rider swung down with practiced grace. A woman young, mid to late 20s, Apache by the looks of her. She wore a leather skirt, soft riding boots, and a light-colored blouse tucked neat at the waist. Her long black hair hung wet over her shoulders, braided with red thread. She did not flinch when their eyes met. Cole stammered forward, brushing rain from his hat. "Ma'am," he said, his voice rough from years of talking more to horses than people. "You lost." Her gaze did not waver. Her voice was quiet, but it carried like steel under silk. "No, sir. I came here on purpose." That stopped him cold. He studied her face in the moonlight. Strong cheekbones, dark eyes that held something he could not quite name. Determination, maybe, or memory. "Do I know you?" he asked. "You did once," she said softly, "though I don't expect you to remember." Cole frowned. The storm, the years, the face, none of it added up. Not yet. She took a step closer, boots squelching in the mud. 19 years ago, she said, there was a flood near Red Creek. A little girl was trapped in the current. Most folks stood back, but one cowboy tied himself to a fence post and went in after her. The memory hit like a blow to the chest. Cole staggered back a step. That day had carved itself into his bones. The rope burning his palms, the girl clinging to a tree branch, her cries nearly lost in the roar of water. He had been 40 years old, married to Margaret for just 3 months, and the flood had come so fast that nobody had time to think, only to act. He remembered tying himself to that fence post with manila rope, remembered the cold water trying to rip him away, remembered the weight of the child in his arms when he finally pulled her free. He had not thought of it in years, not because it was not important, but because Margaret had died 3 years later, and grief had a way of burying everything that came before it. "You're her," he said, voice barely above a whisper. The woman nodded. "My name is Nolan Morningstar. I was 8 years old. You saved me, and I've been looking for you ever since." The wind died down around them. Cole stared at her, unsure what to say, unsure if this was some dream spun by a stormy night and a guilty heart. But there was something in her face, something strong and familiar. She had not come by mistake. "Why now?" he managed. After all this time, Nolan stepped forward. The distance between them vanished with a single sentence. "It's been 19 years, Cole Whitlock. I've come back to keep a promise you don't remember making." Cole felt the words sink into him like the rain had sunk into the land. Heavy, unshakable. "What promise?" he asked. She smiled, small and sad. "You told me, stay brave, little one. This land tests everyone who loves it. I never forgot that. And I swore to myself if I ever found the man who gave me those words, I'd offer him mine." He did not move. Could not. His hands felt too old, his chest too tight. The silence between them stretched wide enough to swallow the whole valley, but she did not rush him. She simply looked at the old cowboy standing in the barn light with lines on his face and dust on his boots and waited. He swallowed hard. "You came all this way just for that?" "I didn't come to thank you, Mr. Whitlock," she said, stepping past him toward the porch. "I came to stay." Inside the cabin, Cole poured 2 cups of coffee with hands that would not stop shaking. Nellen stood by the hearth, the glow of the fire catching in her dark eyes. The rain tapped gently on the roof as if asking permission to keep falling. She sipped slowly. He watched her silent. The cabin was simple. Wooden walls that Cole and Marcus had built in 1867. A table made from mesquite scarred by years of meals eaten alone. A gun cabinet holding his Winchester Model 1873. A regulator clock from Boston that Margaret had insisted on buying at steady tick, the only sound that kept him company most nights. And there on the mantel above the fireplace, a tintype photograph of Margaret in a simple wooden frame. Nellen looked at the photograph for a long moment. "Your wife was," Cole said quietly. "Margaret. She passed 16 years ago." "I'm sorry." He nodded. There was nothing else to say about that. 16 years had not made it easier, only more familiar. Finally, Nalen looked up. "Do you remember what you told me that day, Cole?" He shook his head. "No." "You pulled me out of that water," she said gently, "wrapped me in your coat, held me until the others came. And right before I fell asleep, you said, 'Stay brave, little one. Life will test you, but don't let it break you.'" Cole chuckled bitterly. "That just sounds like something a cowboy says to calm a kid." "Maybe to you," she said, "but to me it was gospel." She sat back, hands resting lightly on her lap, and began to tell him about the 19 years between that flood and this moment. After the flood in 1866, her people had moved south. Their camp was gone, washed away. Her father broke his leg during the evacuation, a break that never healed right, that left him limping and unable to hunt. Her mother fell sick that winter. Pneumonia maybe, or something worse. The medicine woman tried, but some illnesses do not care about herbs and prayers. She died in January of 1867. Nellen was 8 years old. She and her younger brother were taken in by their grandmother, an old woman who lived near the White Mountains. They learned to survive. Nalen learned healing from the elder women plants and roots and poultices. They moved from one camp to another, helping where they could. She worked with the sick, the wounded. She buried people before she turned 15, learned that death was not always the enemy. Sometimes it was mercy. In 1876, when she was 17, she met a group of Jesuit priests traveling through the territory. They took her to Mission San Xavier del Bac near Tucson. There, a French nun named Sister Catherine taught her to read and write English, taught her medicine the way white doctors practiced it. Nalen stayed for 5 years learning both worlds, the Apache way and the American way, knowing that to survive in this changing land, she would need both. In 1881, she took a job at Fort Apache as a contract nurse. The Army did not heal their soldiers as long as the healing got done. She spent 4 years there treating everything from bullet wounds to fever from broken bones to the deep sickness that came from hopelessness. And all the while she asked questions. Where was the cowboy who saved the Apache girl in 1866? Where was Red Creek? Where was the man named Whitlock? Some people remembered, some did not. It took her from Tombstone to Prescott, from Tucson to Flagstaff. Every town, every saloon, every general store. She showed her scar, the rope burn on her right wrist that had never quite faded, and asked if anyone knew a man who might have made it. And finally, 3 months ago, an old buffalo hunter in a Prescott tavern had said, "Cole Whitlock. Sure, I know him. Got a ranch about 12 miles south of Red River Junction. Keeps to himself mostly. Lost his wife years back." Nayland had ridden out the next week. Cole listened to all of this without interrupting. When she finished, he looked down at his boots-worn leather that had walked this land for more years than he cared to count. "You went through all that," he said slowly. "Because of a flood I barely remember." "No," she said. "I lived through it because of you." The fire snapped loudly between them. Cole leaned back in his chair, rubbing the back of his neck. Outside, the rain had stopped entirely. The world was quiet again, the way it always was after storms passed. "I don't know what to say to that," he admitted. "You don't have to say anything." They sat in silence for a while, the way two people do when words are not enough to bridge everything that has happened in their separate lives. Finally, Cole spoke. "You really been looking for me all this time?" Nolan nodded. "I kept asking around. Sometimes I'd find someone who remembered a cowboy named Whitlock who ran cattle through Apache land. Other times I'd hit dead ends. Took me years just to find out you were still in Arizona." Cole ran a hand over his graying beard. "Most folks don't even remember that day. Hell, most days I wasn't even sure it was real." "It was real," she said, voice steady. "Real enough to build a life from." He stared at her for a long moment. "You could have done anything with your life. Why come here to this ranch, to me?" She looked around the cabin, simple wooden filled with the smell of coffee and smoke, with old pictures on the mantel and a saddle near the door. "I needed to see if the man who saved me was still that man," she said. "And if he's not," Cole asked, voice low, "then I would have left." "But he is," he shook his head. "I'm not who I used to be. I've buried more friends than I can name. Lost my wife to sickness. Spent years talking more to horses than people." Nayland did not flinch. "I didn't come looking for a perfect man, Cole. I came to see the one who changed in everything." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. "So now what?" "That depends," she said gently, "on whether you'll let someone stay." The wind picked up outside, whistling against the window pane. Rain had started again, softer this time, like the land was catching its breath. Cole stood slowly, his knees creaking, and poured himself another cup of coffee. He hesitated, then filled hers too. When he handed it to her, she smiled. A real one this time. He returned to his chair, sipping slowly. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "You don't have to know," she replied. "You just have to let it happen." They drank in silence again. But it was not heavy this time. It was expectant. Finally, she looked at him across the rim of her cup. "Will you show me around tomorrow, the ranch, I mean?" Cole nodded. "Sure. Look at. Everything matters," she said softly, "when it's tied to a memory." They sat by the fire until it died low, until the room was just shadows and breath. He offered her the guest room across the hall, the one that had not been used since Margaret's sister visited in 1876. She thanked him, disappeared quietly, her footsteps light on the old floorboards. Cole stayed a while longer in his chair, staring at the embers. He thought about what she had said, about 19 years of searching, about offering her life to the man who saved it. He whispered to himself, almost in disbelief, "She came all this way for me?" Then for the first time in years, he smiled. Just a little. The next morning, the land was washed clean. Nellen was already awake, standing on the porch, watching the light spread across the valley. The sky was that particular shade of blue that only comes after rain, when the air is scrubbed fresh and the world feels new again, even if it is not. Cole stepped beside her, coffee in hand. "You sleep all right?" "I did," she said. This place, it doesn't feel strange. You'll change your mind after mending fences in a windstorm. She smirked. I've faced worse. He nodded toward the pasture. Cattle need moving today. Might get your boots muddy. I brought them for that. He looked at her again, calm, ready, rooted. And though he did not say it aloud, something inside him shifted. The silence did not feel so loud anymore. After breakfast, eggs cooked crisp and bread warmed over the fire, Cole handed her a worn pair of work gloves. If you're still set on helping, he said, I've got a gate that's been swinging loose for a month. Might be time it stopped. She took the gloves without hesitation. Lead the way. They walked side by side through the tall grass boots brushing against dew-soaked stalks. The storm from the night before had left the land soft and damp, the kind of earth that held footprints like a memory. Horses lifted their heads as they passed, watching silently with that calm intelligence animals have when they know they are safe. The work was simple but necessary. 3 fence posts had come loose where the ground had eroded. Cole showed her how to dig out the old post, how to set a new one deep enough that winter winds would not shake it, how to tamp the earth down tight with a steel bar. Nalin worked with quiet focus, her movements deliberate and efficient. She did not complain when dirt got under her nails, or when sweat beaded on her forehead under the climbing sun. Cole kept stealing glances at her. He had not expected her to stay more than a night, maybe 2. But there she was, steady as sunrise, hammering nails and pulling wire, like she had done it all her life. They finished before noon. Cole leaned against the fence post, sweat on his brow, breath slow and even. Nalin joined him, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. She looked out across the open land. This place has seen a lot of years, she said. He nodded. And more ghosts than I care to count. She did not ask, just stood beside him in silence, letting the wind speak where words could not. Later, back at the barn, Cole brushed down his horse while Nalin sorted rope from a weathered wooden bin. That was when Marcus Ironwood showed up. Marcus was 64 years old, broad-shouldered and leather-skinned, his long black braids streaked with silver. He had 1/4 Cherokee blood from his grandmother, a fact he wore with quiet pride. He had been Cole's friend since the war, since they had fought together in the Union 2nd Cavalry from Shiloh to Appomattox. After the war, Marcus had settled 2 miles west, working as a blacksmith. His wife had died in 1878. His son Jacob was a deputy marshal, now 28 years old and already making a name for himself. Marcus rode up slowly, dismounted with ease despite his age, and tied his mare to the post. Well, I'll be damned, he said, eyeing the woman standing in his best friend's barn. You got company, Cole, and she ain't selling Bibles. Cole sighed. Marcus meet Nalin Morningstar. Marcus tipped his hat. Pleasure, ma'am. Nalin nodded. Likewise. Cole shot Marcus a look that said, don't start. But the blacksmith only grinned. You finally let someone into this God-forsaken place, he said. Took long enough. Cole did not answer. Nalin just smiled, returning to her task like she had known Marcus all her life. The 3 of them sat on the porch later, drinking coffee under a sky that promised more sun than storm. Marcus rocked slowly in the chair he had carved for Cole years ago, the same one Margaret used to sit in before the cancer took her. So, Marcus said, glancing sideways at Cole, you gonna tell me what brought her here, or do I got to guess? Cole hesitated. Nalin beat him to it. He saved my life 19 years ago, she said. I was a girl caught in the flood down near Red Creek. Marcus leaned back, brow lifting. Well, I'll be. The flood of 66, I remember that. Whole damn valley flooded. Lost 15 head of cattle myself. I've been searching for him since, Nalin added, and I made a vow. If I ever found the man who gave me life, I'd offer him mine. The words did not hang in the air. They sank deep into the wood of the porch, into the silence, into whatever was left of Cole's carefully guarded heart. Marcus let out a low whistle. That right there's the kind of thing folks write songs about. Cole muttered, don't need no song. Nalin sipped her coffee. You don't have to decide anything now, she said gently. I didn't come to press you. I just came to be near the man who gave me something worth remembering. Marcus stood, his boots creaking on the porch. Well, I should be heading back. Hammer ain't going to swing itself. He nodded at Nalin. You've got grit, ma'am. Don't let him run from that. She smiled. I won't. When Marcus was gone, Cole stood quietly watching the dust settle from his friend's departure. You make it sound easy, he said after a long pause. What part? Nayland asked. Coming here, saying what you said, like it doesn't weigh a damn ton. Nolan stood slowly, walked down off the porch, turned to face him under the open sky. It does weigh a ton, Cole. Every mile I rode, every town I passed through, not knowing if you were even still alive every day, I wondered if I was chasing a memory instead of a man. She took a step closer. But I'd carry that weight 100 times if it brought me back here. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The wind picked up, rustling the wildflowers along the fence line. I ain't young anymore, he said finally. I ain't got much left to give. I'm not here to take, she said. I'm here to share. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he did not feel alone in his own skin. That afternoon, he took her to the cottonwood tree. It stood at the southern edge of the property near the dry creek bed that only ran when the rains came hard. The tree was old, older than Cole's claim to the land, its trunk thick and gnarled, its branches spreading wide like the arms of something that had learned to hold on through every storm. Beneath it was a grave. The headstone was granite brought in from Prescott at considerable expense. The words carved into it read, Margaret Ann Whitlock, 1830 to 1869, beloved wife, her courage built this land. Around the grave was a wrought iron fence, simple but strong, built by Marcus in 1870. Wild asters grew around the perimeter, small purple flowers that Margaret had planted in the spring of 1868, the last spring she had been strong enough to work the garden. Nolan stood quietly, hands folded, looking at the grave with the kind of respect that did not need to be taught. Cole removed his hat. This is Margaret, my wife. She was young, Nolan said softly, reading the dates. 39. Spanish flu took her in January of 69. Whole territory got hit that winter. We tried everything. Doctor from Tucson, medicine from the Apaches, prayer. Nothing worked. I'm sorry. Me too. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Cole spoke again, his voice rougher than before. Margaret had 1/8 Cherokee blood, from her grandmother on her mother's side. She never told most folks. She was afraid of how they'd treat her if they knew. Nayland looked at him, surprised. Only me and Father O'Malley knew, Cole continued, the priest who married us. She asked him never to say anything, and he never did. But she told me on our wedding night, said she wanted me to know the truth before we built a life together. He paused, looking down at the grave. She would have liked you. She always said the land didn't belong to anyone. We were just borrowing it to pass on to the next generation. Nolan reached out, placed her hand on the gravestone. The granite was cool under her palm. She understood, Nayland said quietly. She knew what it felt like to hide who you were. Yeah, she did. Cole replaced his hat, but he did not move away from the grave. Not yet. That's why I didn't flinch when you showed up, he said. Margaret taught me that blood doesn't matter. What matters is what you do with the life you're given. Nolan looked at him, and in her eyes was something that might have been gratitude or recognition, or both. I think, she said slowly, that's why I was supposed to find you. They walked back to the house in comfortable silence. The sun was high now, hot and bright, but there was a breeze coming off the hills that made the heat bearable. Cole showed her the rest of the property. The north pasture, where he ran 40 head of cattle. The smaller barn, where he kept tools and hay. The well that he and Marguerite had dug together in 1867, 40 feet deep and still giving clear water. It's a good place, Nayland said. It's honest work, Cole replied. That's all I ever wanted. 3 days later, Cole decided it was time to take Nayland into town. Red River Junction was 12 miles north, a half-day's ride if you did not push the horses. They needed supplies. Flour, coffee, kerosene, nails for the fence repair he had been putting off. And besides, people were going to talk no matter what. Might as well let them see what they were talking about. They packed light. Cole saddled his bay gelding, a 14-year-old horse named Copper, that had carried him through more miles than either of them cared to count. Nolan rode the Appaloosa. She had arrived on a mare she called Dustflower, for the way its coat looked like scattered ash on cream. The ride was pleasant. The trail wound through scrubland dotted with mesquite and juniper, past outcroppings of red rock that glowed in the morning sun. They did not talk much. There was something comfortable about the silence between them now, a shared understanding that words were not always necessary. Red River Junction appeared on the horizon just before noon. It was not much of a town. One main street, 60 feet wide and unpaved. A row of wooden buildings, Martinez General Store, Red River Saloon, the Sheriff's Office, St. Michael's Catholic Church, and Blackwood's Smithy. Population maybe 340 on a good day. The telegraph office had been installed in 1883, a sign of progress. The railroad had not come yet, but everyone said it would by 1887. As they rode down Main Street, heads turned. Of course they did. Cole Whitlock had not ridden into town with anyone in nearly 6 years, and never with a woman beside him. Whispers started before they even dismounted. "Who's that with Whitlock?" "She looks Apache." "I heard she's staying out at the ranch." "Well, ain't that something?" Cole heard every word. He always did. Small towns had a way of making sure you heard what they thought. They hitched their horses in front of Martinez General Store. Cole stepped inside first, the familiar ring of the doorbell marking his entrance. Rosa Martinez looked up from behind the counter. She was 45 years old, still striking in a tired kind of way, her dark curls tied up in a red scarf. Her gaze landed on Cole, then shifted to the woman just behind him. She paused. "Morning, Cole," Rosa said slowly. "Rosa," then to Nolan, "Ma'am." Nolan gave a polite nod. "Good morning." Rosa's eyes lingered a second too long, then dropped to the ledger on the counter. "What can I help you with?" "Flour, coffee, kerosene, nails, and a new bridle if you got one." Rosa nodded. "I'll pull it together." As she moved through the store gathering items, Cole wandered the aisles with Nolan close behind. The store smelled of leather dust and cinnamon from a cracked barrel near the register. Shelves held everything from cast iron pans to bottles of laudanum, from Winchester ammunition to bolts of calico fabric. Outside, the murmurs grew louder. Cole could feel eyes on them through the window. "Don't much care for the way they look at you," he muttered. Nolan glanced at the door. "They don't see a woman. They see story they want to tear apart." "You always talk like you've been through a war." She looked him dead in the eyes. "I have. Just not the kind you read about in books." Rosa returned with the supplies bundled in burlap. "That'll be $14.75, Cole." He handed her the coins. 7 silver dollars, 5 quarters, and a $10 gold eagle that she made change for. She recorded the transaction in her ledger with careful penmanship. Cole Whitlock, 1475, September 18th, 1885. "She's helping me out on the ranch for a while," Cole said, nodding toward Nalin. Rosa raised her brows slightly. "I figured as much." Cole caught the edge in her tone, but did not respond. He gathered the supplies and stepped outside. Nellen followed, her face unreadable. They were halfway to the wagon when someone called out from across the street. "Hey, Whitlock." Cole turned. A tall, thick-jawed man stood on the porch of the saloon drinking glass and hand dust on his boots. Victor Thornhill, 53 years old, owner of Thornhill Ranch, the largest spread in the county, with 2,400 acres and 15 hired hands. He was also a member of the Arizona Territorial Council, which meant he had money, influence, and the kind of arrogance that came from never being told no. Victor Thornhill had also 30 years ago asked Margaret to marry him. She had said no. He had never forgiven Cole for being the man she said yes to. "That's your new squaw," Victor said, loud enough for the whole street to hear. The words sliced the air like broken glass. Cole froze. Nayland did not flinch. Victor smirked, lifting his glass. "She fixing fences or warming your bed?" The porch behind him erupted in ugly laughter. 3 ranch hands men who worked for Victor and did what he told them to do. Cole dropped the supply bundle, walked across the street in silence. Every step was slow, measured, deliberate. When he reached the saloon, he did not speak. He just swung. A right hook, clean and fast, pivoting from the hip with 185 pounds behind it. His fist connected with Victor's jaw with a sound like an axe hitting wood. Victor crumpled backward into a post, his glass shattering beside him. The laughter stopped. Dead silence. Cole stood over him, voice cold and clear as winter air. "You speak about her like that again, you'll leave this town with fewer teeth than you came in with." He turned, walked back across the street, picked up the bundle, and tossed it into the wagon. Nayleen said nothing. They mounted their horses and rode out of town with every pair of eyes watching them go. Halfway back to the ranch, Cole finally spoke. "You didn't say a word." I've heard worse, she said. You shouldn't have to. Nalin looked over at him. That's not your burden to carry. He shook his head. It is now. The rest of the ride was silent, save for the creak of leather and the soft clip of hooves on dirt. When they reached the ranch, Cole jumped down and began unloading the wagon. Nalin joined him. Town folk will keep talking, he said. They always do. I don't want you to be hurt by it. She paused. Cole, I've been judged for the color of my skin, the tribe I was born into, the way I speak, the way I ride the herbs I use to heal people, and the silence I keep. But none of it ever broke me. I won't let this place be the first. He looked at her unsure what to say, so he just nodded. That night he sat alone on the porch after she had gone to bed, watching stars scatter across the sky like ash from an old fire. He thought about what she had said and what Victor had said. He did not feel ashamed, but he felt something close. The quiet rage of a man who wanted to do right by someone and did not know if he could. The next morning came early. Cole found Nalin in the pasture feeding the horses. One of the mares, usually shy, had her head nestled against Nalin's shoulder, nuzzling her like kin. She likes you, he said. Nalin smiled softly, brushing the animal's mane. Animals always know who means no harm. Cole watched at her for a long moment. Are you still sure you want to stay? I came here on purpose, Cole. I'm not going anywhere just because some people don't like the look of me. He nodded, then cleared his throat. I was thinking, might ride out tomorrow. Check the far fence line. It's a long trip. You up for it? She looked at him, eyes steady. I've already come this far. And so they would ride out the next day beyond the edges of what either of them had touched in years, toward places where fences sagged but hearts might hold. But that night, as the sun set and the world turned to shades of orange and purple, Cole walked the perimeter of the ranch one more time. And that was when he found it. Footprints. Fresh. 3 sets of boots stopping near the barn, circling the corral, then heading back toward the ridge. And nailed to the barn door with a knife was a piece of paper, rain-stained but readable. The handwriting was rough, angry. Send the squaw back where she belongs, or learn what fire tastes like. Cole pulled the paper down, stared at it for a long moment, then crumpled it in his fist. Nalin stepped out of the house, lantern in hand. She saw his face and knew. They came while we were gone, he said. She walked over, looked at the footprints, then at the crumpled paper. They'll be back, she said quietly. I know. What do we do? Cole looked at her, then at the land around them. His land, built with his hands and Margaret's faith, paid for with sweat and years and the kind of stubbornness that did not bend easy. We stand, he said, together. Nalin nodded, and in the fading light beneath a sky full of stars that had watched this land long before any of them were born, 2 people made a choice. Not to run, not to hide, but to face whatever came next with their feet planted firm and their eyes open. Because some things were worth fighting for. And this, whatever this was becoming between them, felt like one of those things. The week that followed was deceptively quiet. Cole and Nalin fell into a rhythm that felt both new and ancient, like a song half remembered from childhood. They rose before dawn, worked the land until the sun climbed high, shared simple meals, and sat on the porch as evening settled over the valley. But beneath the routine was a tension. Neither of them mentioned the awareness that the threat was not gone, only waiting. On the 4th morning, Cole began fortifying the ranch. Not dramatically, not with fanfare, just the quiet, methodical preparations of a man who had learned in the war that survival was built on anticipation, not reaction. He started with the windows. The house had 6 each, one a potential entry point. Cole measured and cut oak planks thick enough to stop a bullet if it came to that. He drilled holes with a hand auger, the kind of back-breaking work that made his shoulders ache by midday. Nalin worked beside him, holding boards steady while he hammered iron brackets into place. Marcus had forged the brackets years ago, heavy and reliable. Leave a gap, Cole instructed. 2 inches, enough to see through, enough to shoot through if we have to. Nalin nodded, understanding without needing explanation. Next came the weapons. Cole owned 3 firearms worth depending on. The Winchester Model 1873, chambered in .44-40 caliber with 15 rounds in the magazine. He had bought it new in Prescott, paid $60 for it, and it had never failed him. There were 2 Colt Peacemakers, .45 caliber revolvers, 6 shots each. and in the back of the closet, wrapped in oilcloth, a Sharps rifle in .50 caliber. Long range, single shot, the kind of gun you used when you needed to reach out and touch someone at 300 yards. He laid them all out on the kitchen table, cleaned and oiled, each one with the care of a man who understood that tools kept you alive. Nolan watched, fascinated by the precision of his movements. "You learned this in the war?" she asked. "Yes, Union 2nd Cavalry, 1861 to 65. Fought from Shiloh to Appomattox. After it was over, I swore I'd never be caught unprepared again." He showed her how to load the Winchester, how to work the lever action, how to sight down the barrel. She had fired guns before at Fort Apache, the soldiers had taught her, but Cole's instruction was different. Patient, thorough. "If it comes to shooting," he said, "aim for center mass, don't try to be fancy, just stop the threat." "I hope it doesn't come to that." "So do I, but hope's not a strategy." They also rigged a warning system. Cole strung thin wire 6 inches off the ground at 3 approaches to the ranch, each wire connected to cowbells hung from branches. Simple, effective. Anyone stumbling through in the dark would announce themselves. Finally they dug, a tunnel narrow and low running from the back of the house to the barn 18 feet through hard earth, just wide enough to crawl through. An escape route if the house became untenable. They covered the entrance with a trap door and a rug, hidden but there if needed. By the end of the week, Cottonwood Creek Ranch looked the same from the outside, but it was a fortress, now quiet and prepared. On the 7th day, Nayland took out paper and a pencil. Cole watched her write, the letters formed with careful precision, the kind of penmanship taught by nuns who believed that handwriting reflected character. She wrote in English, then paused, then wrote more. When she finished, she folded the paper and sealed it with candle wax. "A letter," she said, "to my brother, Dakota. He's 19 lives at San Carlos Reservation. You want me to mail it? If something happens to me, I want him to know I found you, that I died in a place that mattered." Cole's jaw tightened. "Nothing's going to happen to you." "Maybe, but I need to be ready anyway." He took the letter, tucked it into his coat pocket, and in that moment a quiet resolve settled over him. Not loud, not dramatic, just the simple, unshakable decision that whatever came next, Nolan Morningstar would not face it alone. Marcus arrived on horseback just before noon, his face grim. He dismounted without his usual easy smile, tied his mare to the post, and walked straight to where Cole was repairing a section of corral fence. "We need to talk," Marcus said. They walked away from the house, out toward the cottonwood tree, where the words could not be overheard. Marcus pulled off his hat, wiped sweat from his brow, despite the cool air. "Victor Thornhill's gathering men," Marcus said quietly. "My son told me." Jacob heard it straight from one of the deputy marshals. "Victor's been in town every night this week buying drinks, talking loud about how you're harboring an illegal Apache and how it's a threat to the community." Cole's expression did not change, but his hands curled into fists. "He's still mad I punched him." "It's more than that. Jacob also heard something else." Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. "Victor's talking to the territorial council. He's claiming your land title isn't valid. Says you violated some technicality in the filing back in '67. That's horse shit. My title's been registered with the land office for 18 years. I've paid taxes every year. It's clean. I know that, you know that, but Victor's got money and lawyers, and he's using them." Cole stared out at the hills, jaw working. "Why now? Why after all these years?" Marcus hesitated, then spoke the truth that both of them had danced around. "You know why, Margaret. Margaret's been gone 16 years. Don't matter. Victor asked her to marry him back in '55. She said no. Then she married you. He never got over it. And now he sees you with another woman living on the land where Margaret's buried and it's eating him alive." Cole closed his eyes, opened them. "So this isn't about Nolan being Apache." "Oh, it's about that too. Victor hates plenty of things, but what he hates most is you having what he wanted." They stood in silence for a moment, the wind moving through the cottonwood branches with a sound like whispered warnings. "There's one more thing," Marcus said, "and you need to hear it." Cole turned. Victor had a son, back in 1860, with an Apache woman. The boy died in '61 smallpox. Victor blamed the Apache for not being able to save him. That's when the hate really took root. He lost the woman he loved, Margaret, and he lost his only child. Everything he's done since has been twisted up in that pain. Cole absorbed this information slowly. It did not excuse Victor, but it explained him. A man broken by loss, lashing out at anything that reminded him of what he could not have. "So what do we do?" Marcus asked. "We prepare, and we wait." That evening, Father Thomas O'Malley rode up on his old mare, a gentle animal that moved at the pace of contemplation rather than urgency. The priest was 71 years old, white-haired and weathered, wearing his black soutane and a wide-brimmed hat against the sun. He had been in Arizona Territory since 1855, had married Cole and Margaret in 1866, had buried Margaret in 1869. He was one of the few men Cole trusted completely. Father O'Malley dismounted with the careful movements of age, tied his horse, and walked to the porch where Cole sat cleaning the Winchester. "Good evening, my son." "Father." The priest settled into the rocking chair, the one Marcus had made. "I heard about the incident in town, and I've heard the talk since then. I came to see if you needed counsel." "You here to tell me to send Nolan away?" "No, I'm here to tell you that what's coming is bigger than you think." Cole set down the rifle, waited. Father O'Malley reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. "This is a copy of a petition. Victor Thornhill is circulating it through town. It calls for the Territorial Council to investigate your alleged violation of the Indian Relocation Act of 1875. Cole took the paper, scanned it. 47 signatures. Some were Victor's ranch hands. Some were townspeople who signed out of fear or ignorance. But not everyone had signed. Rosa Martinez had refused. Father O'Malley had refused. Marcus had refused. Is this legal? It can be, if enough pressure is applied. The Territorial Council has broad authority over land use and resident status. Victor is using his position to weaponize the bureaucracy against you." Nayland stepped out onto the porch, drawn by the serious tone. Father O'Malley stood, removed his hat. "You must be Miss Morningstar. I'm Father Thomas O'Malley." "Pleased to meet you, Father." "The pleasure is mine. I knew your people years ago. Good people. I'm sorry for the hardships they've endured." Nolan inclined her head in acknowledgement. Father O'Malley turned back to Cole. "You need to understand something. Victor has money. He has influence. If he pushes this to the territorial court, you could lose the land. The law is not always just coal. Sometimes it's just powerful. I won't let him take this place. Then you need to prepare for a fight that won't be won with fists or guns. You'll need lawyers, witnesses, documentation." Cole felt the weight of it settling on him. He had survived the war. He had built this ranch from nothing. But legal battles were a different kind of enemy, one that could not be faced with courage alone. "I'll do what I have to," he said. Father O'Malley placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know you will, and when the time comes, I'll stand with you. God doesn't measure men by the color of their skin or the ink on their deeds. He measures them by their actions, and yours have always been honorable." After the priest left, Nalin and Cole stood on the porch in the gathering dusk. The sky was streaked with orange and purple, beautiful and indifferent to human struggles. "You should leave," Cole said quietly, "before this gets worse." "No. Nalin, I'm serious. If you go now, this ends. Victor gets what he wants, and you're safe." She turned to face him, her eyes fierce. "I didn't ride across this territory for 19 years to run at the first sign of trouble. I came here to stay. That hasn't changed. This could cost you everything. Then we'll lose together, but we won't run." Cole looked at her, this woman who had walked back into his life and refused to leave it, and felt something shift in his chest. Not love, not yet, but the beginning of it. The recognition that some people were worth the fight. "All right," he said, "we stand." The fire came on the night of September 25th. Cole woke to the smell of smoke. Not wood smoke from the fireplace, but something sharper, hungrier. He bolted upright, grabbed his pants, and ran to the window. The southern corral was ablaze, flames licking 15 feet into the night sky, orange and red, against the darkness. "Nolan," he shouted. "Fire!" She appeared in seconds, already dressed, moving with the quick efficiency of someone trained to respond to emergencies. They ran outside together. The heat hit them like a physical force, and the sound was a roar, the fire devouring dry wood and straw with terrible speed. "The horses!" Nalin shouted. She ran toward the barn, wrapping a wet cloth over her mouth and nose. Cole grabbed 2 buckets, filled them at the well, and started hauling water. But he knew immediately it was not enough. The fire was too big, too fast. They needed help. As if summoned by the flames, Marcus appeared on horseback, riding hard from the west. He had seen the glow from his property 2 miles away. He brought burlap sacks and started beating at the smaller flames while Cole dug a fire break with a shovel, creating a trench 2 feet deep around the burning structure to keep the fire from spreading. Nolan led the horses out one by one, calm, despite the chaos, singing a low Apache chant that seemed to soothe the panicked animals. 6 horses, all saved, but one had burns on its rear legs and the pain in its eyes was evident. They fought the fire for 90 minutes. When it was finally out, the eastern third of the corral was gone, reduced to blackened timber and ash. 200 pounds of hay lost. 1 horse injured, and the smell of kerosene was everywhere. As dawn broke, they examined the scene. The evidence was unmistakable. Boot prints size 11 with a distinctive heel pattern, the kind worn by Victor Thornhill's ranch hands. And in the bushes 20 yards from the fire's origin, a 5-gallon tin can, kerosene, with the initials VT scratched into the metal. Marcus held up the can. This is as clear as it gets. Hayes will say it's not enough, Cole said bitterly. He'll say anyone could have left it there. Maybe, but we're taking it to him anyway. Cole rode into Red River Junction that morning, the kerosene can tied to his saddle, his face set like stone. He walked into the sheriff's office without knocking. Sheriff William Hayes sat behind his desk, a cup of coffee steaming beside a stack of paperwork. He was 57 years old, a former Texas Ranger who had taken the sheriff job 5 years ago when the pay was steady and the violence was theoretically less. He looked up when Cole entered inside. I heard about the fire. Then you know why I'm here. Cole dropped the can on the desk. Evidence. Hayes picked it up, examined the initials. His face revealed nothing. VT could be anyone. Vincent Taylor? Vernon Thompson? Don't insult me, Will. We both know whose men did this. Knowing and proving are different things, Cole. You want me to arrest Victor Thornhill, member of the Territorial Council, based on a can of kerosene? I want you to do your job. Hayes set the can down. I will investigate, but I need more than this. How much more do I need to die first? The sheriff's expression hardened. Watch your tone. Cole leaned forward, hands flat on the desk. Victor Thornhill hired men to burn my property. Next time it might be my house, with people inside. And you're sitting here telling me you need more evidence. What kind of law is that? Hayes stood, his own anger rising. The kind that keeps me from getting sued or shot. You think I like this? Victor's got lawyers, money, power. If I move against him without ironclad proof, he'll have my badge and my pension. So you're afraid of him. I'm realistic, and you should be too. Cole straightened, grabbed the can. Keep the evidence. Do your job or don't. But don't pretend you're powerless. As he turned to leave, Hayes spoke again. Cole, there is something else you need to know. Cole stopped. Victor filed a claim with the Territorial Court 3 days ago. He's challenging your land title. Says your filing in '67 was incomplete, missing the signature of the Land Office Commissioner. Only had the Deputy Commissioner's signature. Technically, that's grounds for appeal. The floor seemed to drop out from under Cole's feet. That's insane. I've filed everything correctly. I've had clear title for 18 years. Maybe, but Victor's got a lawyer from Tucson digging through old records. If they find a technicality, they can tie this up in court for years. Bleed you dry with legal fees. Cole understood then. Victor was not just trying to scare Nolan away. He was trying to take everything. The land, the house, the grave where Margaret rested. All of it. When's the hearing? Hasn't been scheduled yet. Could be months. Cole walked out without another word, his mind already racing through options, none of them good. That evening, the Red River Town Council held an emergency meeting at the church hall. Cole and Nayland attended along with Marcus' father O'Malley and Rosa Martinez. The hall was packed, maybe 60 people, the air thick with tension and body heat. Mayor Edwin Pritchard called the meeting to order. He was 62, a banker by trade, careful and calculating. Beside him sat Victor Thornhill, looking smug. Also present were Mrs. Henderson, the schoolteacher, and Samuel Grant, who owned the lumber mill. Victor stood to present the petition. We are facing a serious threat to our community. Mr. Whitlock is violating federal law by harboring an Apache woman on private land. This creates instability and sets a dangerous precedent. Cole rose. Naylin Morningstar is not a prisoner. She's a free citizen who worked as a contract nurse at Fort Apache for 4 years. She has documentation from the United States Army. There's no violation. Victor sneered. Documentation can be forged. Before Cole could respond, Naylin stood. The room went silent. A woman speaking at a town council meeting was unusual and unprecedented. "May I address the council?" she asked, her voice steady. Mayor Pritchard hesitated, then nodded. Briefly, Naylin stepped forward. She did not raise her voice, did not need to. "My name is Naylin Morningstar. I was born in this territory in 1858, before many of you arrived here. In 1866, when I was 8 years old, I was drowning in Red Creek flood. Mr. Whitlock saved my life. He didn't ask my tribe. He didn't ask if I was legal. He saw a child in danger and acted." She paused, letting the words settle. "I spent 19 years looking for him, not to take revenge, not to claim land, but to offer my skills and my labor to the man who gave me a second chance at life. You call this land yours, but my people walked this earth for 10 generations before you drew your maps. I'm not asking for that land back. I'm only asking for the right to live on a piece of it that was offered to me freely." Her eyes swept the room. "If that violates your laws, then your laws are unjust." The silence was absolute. Then Father O'Malley stood. "I have lived here 30 years. I have witnessed many injustices. But driving away a woman because of her bloodline, that is not law. That is hatred, and God will not forgive us for it." Rosa Martinez stood next. "I agree with Father. My family came from Mexico. We were also called illegal once. Who among us truly belongs here except people like Miss Naylin?" The vote was called. For the petition, Victor and Mrs. Henderson, against Mayor Pritchard and Samuel Grant. A tie. Mayor Pritchard made the deciding call. Without a majority, the petition will not be forwarded to the Territorial Council. However, the land title issue will be reviewed separately by the Land Office. It was a small victory, but Victor was not finished. Over the following days, a new routine emerged. Cole and Naylin worked the ranch by day, but at night they took shifts on watch. 2 hours on, 2 hours off. Cole would patrol with the Winchester. Naylin would sit by the window with the Sharps. They barely spoke during these watches, but their presence to each other became a kind of conversation, a shared vigilance. One evening as they passed each other during a shift change, Naylin placed her hand on Cole's arm. Just for a moment. No words. But the touch said everything. "We're in this together. We're not alone." Cole covered her hand with his own, rough and scarred, meeting smooth and strong. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For staying." She smiled. "Where else would I go?" The attack came on October 2nd, just after midnight. Cole was on watch when the first bell rang. The wire trap on the eastern approach. He fired one warning shot into the air, the sound of the Winchester cracking through the night like thunder. Marcus appeared from the barn, rifle ready. Naylin took position by the cottonwood tree with the Sharps. They had planned for this, drilled for it, and now the planning would be tested. 6 men approached on horseback, silhouettes against the moonlit sky. They stopped at the property line 400 yards out. A voice called from the darkness. "Whitlock, send out the Apache and we'll leave peaceful." Cole recognized the voice. Wade Jennings, Victor's ranch foreman. A hard man who did hard work for good pay and did not ask questions. "The only way you're getting her," Cole shouted back, "is over my dead body. That can be arranged." The shooting started. Muzzle flashes lit up the ridge. Bullets cracked past the house, thudded into wood-shattered glass. Cole returned fire, aiming not to kill but to suppress, to make them keep their heads down. 3 rounds from the Winchester, spaced and deliberate. One man on the ridge went down, clutching his shoulder. Naylin fired the Sharps once. The .50 caliber round was like a thunderclap. A torch one of the men carried exploded, showering sparks, plunging that section of the line into darkness. Marcus held his position at the barn, shotgun ready, but not firing. "Wait for them to come close," he had said. "Let them think they can reach us. Then make them pay for the mistake." 3 riders broke from the group, trying to flank around the western side. They rode hard toward the corral, thinking they could use it for cover. But that was where Deputy Marshal Jacob Blackwood was waiting. He had arrived earlier that evening off duty, but armed, unwilling to let his father and his father's best friend face this alone. Jacob fired twice with his Remington. Both rounds kicked up dirt near the horse's hooves. The animal spooked reared. The riders pulled back, cursing. Then Wade and two others charged straight at the house, a desperate gambit. Cole held his fire until they were 100 yards out. Then he opened up. Two shots, both hitting flesh. One man's horse went down. Another rider screamed, grabbed his leg. Wade himself pressed forward, a pistol in hand. Marcus stepped out of the barn and fired the shotgun. The blast at 40 yards was devastating. Wade's horse took most of it, went down thrashing. Wade hit the ground hard, his leg twisted beneath him. Snap of bone audible even at distance. The remaining attackers broke and ran. 4 men down or wounded, 2 retreating. The fight had lasted maybe 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. Cole and Marcus approached Wade carefully, weapons ready. The foreman was conscious but in agony, his right leg clearly broken. Nayland came down from her position, brought her medical kit. Even enemies got treatment. That was her oath. She set the leg as best she could, splinted it with wood and cloth. Wade gritted his teeth through the pain. "Who hired you?" Cole asked. Winchester pointed at Wade's chest. "Victor Thornhill," Wade gasped. $50 each to run the woman off. And Wade's face was pale with shock, but he kept talking. Pain and fear made men honest. He said if you died in the process accidental-like, he'd pay extra. Said he'd buy the land from your estate at a premium. He wants Cottonwood Creek. Always has. The truth naked and ugly. Victor did not just want revenge. He wanted the land where Margaret was buried. Wanted to own the place where the woman he loved rested. Possession even in death. Jacob loaded Wade and the other wounded men into a wagon. "I've got Wade's confession. That's enough to arrest Victor." But by morning they learned Victor had fled. Ridden to Tucson in the night, was hiding with his lawyers, preparing for a legal fight instead of a physical one. Sheriff Hayes came out to the ranch, examined the evidence, took statements. He looked tired, beaten. "Wade's testimony will hold," Hayes said, "but Victor's claiming self-defense says you're a threat to the community. His lawyers are good. This is going to get ugly." "How ugly?" Cole asked. "There's a hearing scheduled. October 15th, Tucson, Territorial Court. Victor's challenging your land title and claiming you're in violation of multiple territorial statutes. He's going for everything, Cole. The land, the house, legal fees. He means to ruin you." Cole nodded slowly. He had known it was coming, but hearing it made it real. Nolan stood beside him. "Then we fight. Not with guns this time. With truth." Over the next week they prepared. Marcus helped repair the damage from the fire and the gunfight. Jacob began gathering evidence, statements from witnesses who had heard Victor's threats. Rosa provided written testimony about the petition. Father O'Malley prepared to testify about Margaret's Cherokee heritage to expose the hypocrisy of Victor's racism. And Cole went through every piece of paper he owned. The original land filing from March 12, 1867, tax receipts for 18 years, bills of sale for cattle, proof of residency and improvement, everything that said this land was his. But the more he looked, the more he understood Hayes's warning. The filing was signed by Deputy Commissioner James Hartford, not Commissioner Horace Wheeler, technically a subordinate signature. Victor's lawyers would argue it was invalid. The envelope arrived on October 5th. White official sealed with the territorial seal. Cole opened it with steady hands, read the contents once, then again. Injunction. Pending investigation of land claim irregularities and alleged violations of Indian Relocation Act, all rights and privileges pertaining to Cottonwood Creek Ranch are hereby suspended. Court hearing October 15th, Tucson Territorial Court. Failure to appear will result in default judgment and forfeiture of all contested property. Nellen read it over his shoulder. "They're trying to take everything." "Yes? Then we show them they can't." Cole folded the paper carefully. Outside, the sun was setting over the land he had built with his hands and Margaret's courage. The land where he had saved a drowning child 19 years ago, never knowing she would return to save him in turn. "We've got 10 days, he said. "Then we use every one of them." That night, they sat together on the porch, not speaking much, just being present. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent and beautiful. Somewhere out there, Victor Thornhill was preparing his attack. Lawyers and documents and legal strategies. But Cole had something Victor did not. He had people who believed in him. Marcus, Jacob, Father O'Malley, Rosa, and Nayland, who had crossed 19 years and 100 towns to find the man who showed her that courage was not loud, just persistent. "Tomorrow we ride to Tucson," Cole said. "Find a lawyer if we can afford one. Gather every piece of evidence. Prepare for the fight of our lives." Nayland nodded. "And we'll win, because we have to." "Why?" She looked at him, her eyes reflecting starlight. "Because this land isn't just yours anymore. It's ours. And I didn't come all this way to lose it now." Cole reached out, took her hand. She squeezed back. And in that moment, beneath a sky full of stars that had watched this land long before them and would watch long after they made a silent vow, whatever came next, they would face it together. The legal battle was coming. The fight for Cottonwood Creek Ranch. The fight for belonging. The fight for the right to build a life on land that had been bought with sweat and blood and loss. But tonight they had each other. And sometimes that was enough to face tomorrow. Part 3. Judgment in Bloom. The ride to Tucson took 3 days. Cole and Nayland traveled with Marcus and Jacob, 4 riders, moving through high desert country where the air was thin and the sky stretched forever. They camped at night under stars that seemed close enough to touch and spoke little, each lost in their own thoughts about what awaited them. Tucson was the largest settlement in the territory, maybe 7,000 people with adobe buildings and dusty streets that spoke of Spanish roots and American ambitions. The Territorial Land Office stood on Congress Street, a 2-story brick structure that looked more permanent than most of the wooden buildings around it. Inside, the air smelled of paper and ink and bureaucracy. A clerk at the front desk, young and bored, directed them to the records room. But before they could enter, an older man emerged from a back office. He was 67, thin as a rail, with spectacles perched on his nose and ink stains on his fingers. Edmund Pierce, chief clerk, according to the nameplate on his desk. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" His eyes moved to Nayland. "And ma'am." "I need records of a land filing," Cole said. "March 12, 1867, Cole Whitlock, filing number 4782. Pierce adjusted his spectacles, considered for a moment, then nodded. "Follow me." The records room was floor to ceiling with leather-bound volumes, each one containing hundreds of land claims filed over decades. Pierce moved through them with the confidence of a man who had spent 20 years in these stacks. He pulled down a volume labeled 1867 First Quarter, laid it on a reading table, and opened it to the correct page. "Here we are. Cole Whitlock, Cottonwood Creek Ranch, 160 acres under Homestead Act, signed by Deputy Commissioner James Hartford on March 12th. Pierce ran his finger down the page. "Everything appears in order." "Except Hartford was a deputy," Cole said. "Not the commissioner. I've been told that makes it invalid." Pierce frowned. "Who told you that?" "Lawyers working for a man named Victor Thornhill." "Ah." Pierce's expression shifted, understanding dawning. "Let me check something." He disappeared back into the stacks, was gone for 10 minutes. When he returned, he carried another volume, smaller and older. The leather was cracked, the spine reinforced with cloth tape. "This," Pierce said, setting it down carefully, "is Confirmations Volume 1867 AB. Most people don't know it exists." In June of that year, Commissioner Horace Wheeler returned from an extended absence. He reviewed all filings made by Deputy Hartford during his absence and signed confirmations for each one. He opened the volume, turned pages until he found what he was looking for, then turned it toward Cole. There, in faded but legible ink, was a list of filing numbers. And fourth from the top, filing 4782, Cole Whitlock, Cottonwood Creek Ranch. Confirmed. And beside it, the signature of Commissioner Horace Wheeler, dated June 14, 1867. Cole stared at it, not quite believing. "This makes my filing valid." "Completely. Your land title is beyond challenge." "Why didn't Victor's lawyers find this?" Pierce allowed himself a small smile. "Because they're lawyers, not clerks. They know how to argue. I know where the records are. There's a difference." Marcus clapped Cole on the shoulder. "That's our smoking gun." "Can we get a certified copy?" Jacob asked. "I'll prepare one myself," Pierce said, "and I'll testify in court if needed. I was here in '67. I remember processing your claim, Mr. Whitlock. It was proper then. It's proper now." They left the land office with the document in a leather portfolio sealed and certified. One piece of the puzzle solved, but there were still others to gather. Over the next 3 days, they assembled their case like carpenters building a house, one piece at a time. Rosa Martinez agreed to testify, traveled from Red River Junction with her sister to watch the store. She brought written statements from 3 other townspeople who had heard Victor's threats. Father O'Malley arrived on the stagecoach, his black soutane dusty from travel, but his resolve unshaken. He carried Margaret's family Bible where births and deaths were recorded, including the notation that Margaret's grandmother was Cherokee, evidence of her heritage. Wade Jennings, still recovering from his broken leg in the Tucson jail, agreed to testify against Victor in exchange for a reduced sentence. Jacob had worked the deal, leveraging his connections as a deputy marshal. Wade would admit to the arson, the attack, and Victor's payment. More importantly, he would testify that Victor had offered extra money if Cole died in the process. The final witness came as a surprise. Marcus had sent word to San Carlos Reservation, and an old Apache elder had made the journey. Chief Taza, 72 years old, walked with a cane and spoke English learned from missionaries. He remembered the flood of 1866. He had been there. He had seen Cole Whitlock risk his life to save an Apache child, and he would say so under oath. On the evening of October 14th, the night before the trial, they gathered in a rented room above a boarding house. 5 witnesses, 4 advocates, and Nolan. They went over the plan one more time, what each person would say, how the pieces would fit together. But there was one more visitor that night, a knock at the door. Jacob answered, hand on his pistol, then relaxed. The man in the hallway was tall, thin, dressed in an expensive suit, Augustus Blackwell, Victor Thornhill's attorney. I'd like a word with Mr. Whitlock, Blackwell said. Privately. Cole stepped into the hallway, closed the door behind him. They stood facing each other, lawyer and rancher, 2 men playing very different games. I'm here to offer a settlement, Blackwell said, without preamble. My client will pay $2,000 for your land. That's double its assessed value. You take the money, leave Arizona territory, and this all goes away. No. Mr. Whitlock, be reasonable. I have 8 precedents on invalid filings. You can't win this. Then why offer a settlement? Blackwell's eyes narrowed slightly, realizing his mistake. If he was so confident, he would not be here. My client wishes to resolve this efficiently. Your client wants to steal my land because he couldn't have my wife. Tell Victor Thornhill the answer is no. Tomorrow we'll let the judge decide. Blackwell's professional mask slipped for just a moment. You're a fool. Maybe, but I'm a fool who's still standing on his own land. Cole turned and walked back into the room, leaving the lawyer in the hallway. The territorial courthouse was an imposing building, 2 stories of dressed stone with tall windows and a copper roof that gleamed in the morning sun. By 8 o'clock, the courtroom on the 2nd floor was packed. More than 150 people, some from Red River Junction, others just curious about what the newspaper had called the trial of the year. Judge Cornelius Hammond presided. 68 years old, former Union Army colonel with a reputation for being strict but fair. He wore his black robes like armor and his gavel like a sword. When he entered, everyone stood. When he sat, the room followed. Court is in session. The matter before us, Thornhill versus Whitlock, regarding disputed land title and alleged violations of territorial statutes. On one side of the courtroom sat Victor Thornhill, flanked by Augustus Blackwell and 2 junior attorneys. Victor looked confident, almost smug, in a new suit that probably cost more than Cole made in a year. On the other side sat Cole, wearing his best clothes, which were still the clothes of a working rancher. Nolan sat beside him. They had no lawyer, could not afford one. Cole would represent himself, a 60-year-old cowboy, against professional advocates. David and Goliath, if David had a worn hat and calloused hands. Blackwell rose for his opening statement. His voice was smooth, practiced the voice of a man who had won many cases. Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter of law. Mr. Whitlock's land filing in 1867 was improperly executed, lacking the required signature of the Land Office Commissioner. Furthermore, he is currently harboring an Apache woman in violation of federal relocation statutes. We seek to void his claim and award the land to my client for proper use. Judge Hammond made notes. Showed nothing. Cole stood when it was his turn. His voice was rougher, less polished, but it carried the weight of truth. Your Honor, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a rancher. I filed for my land legally in 1867 under the Homestead Act. I built a life there with my wife Margaret. She's buried there. I've paid taxes every year for 18 years. This case isn't about paperwork. It's about a man trying to steal land because he couldn't have the woman buried on it. Judge Hammond's eyebrows rose slightly. Mr. Whitlock, emotion won't win this case. Stick to facts. Yes, sir. Blackwell began his case with surveyors and land experts men who testified about boundary markers and technical requirements. It was dry, methodical, designed to overwhelm with detail. But when it came time for cross-examination, Cole had a secret weapon. Edmund Pierce took the stand. He identified himself as chief clerk of the Territorial Land Office, 20 years of service. Jacob handed him the portfolio containing the 1867 records. Mr. Pierce, Cole said, is my land filing valid? Yes, Deputy Commissioner Hartford had full authority during Commissioner Wheeler's absence. And in June of 1867, Commissioner Wheeler signed confirmations for all of Hartford's filings. Pierce produced the confirmations volume, showed it to the judge. Hammond examined it carefully, compared signatures, checked dates. This appears legitimate, Hammond said, looking at Blackwell. Were you aware of this document? We were not, Your Honor. Blackwell's confident expression had cracked slightly. Then your primary argument is void. Continue, Mr. Whitlock. The momentum had shifted. Cole called his witnesses one by one. Rosa Martinez testified about Victor's threats, about the petition, about the hatred that had been brewing. Father O'Malley testified about Margaret's Cherokee heritage, revealing the irony of Victor's claims about racial purity. But the most powerful moment came when Nayland herself asked to speak. Judge Hammond hesitated, looked at the packed courtroom, then nodded. You may address the court. Briefly. Nayland stood. She wore a simple dress, dark blue, with her Apache beadwork shawl over her shoulders. She did not have notes, did not need them. Your Honor, members of this court, my name is Nayland Morningstar. I was born in Arizona Territory in 1858, 27 years ago. In 1866, when I was 8 years old, I was drowning in Red Creek flood. Mr. Whitlock jumped into that water, tied himself to a fence post, and pulled me out. Her voice was steady, clear, carrying to every corner of the room. He didn't ask if I was Apache or white. He didn't ask if it was legal to save me. He saw a child dying and acted. I spent 19 years searching for him. Not to claim his land, not to burden him, but to offer my life's work to the man who gave me mine. She turned slightly, addressing not just the judge, but everyone watching. You call me illegal, but I was born on this land before it was called Arizona Territory, before it had judges and courts. My grandmother's grandmother walked these mountains. I don't ask you to give me that land back. I only ask this, let me live on one small piece of it offered to me by a man who saved my life. She paused, her eyes finding the judge. If your law says I can't do that, then your law values paper more than humanity. And that's not justice. That's just power. The courtroom was silent, absolutely silent. One woman in the gallery was crying. Judge Hammond looked down at his notes, his face unreadable. Then Blackwell called Victor Thornhill to the stand. It was a mistake, but the lawyer did not know it yet. Victor testified about his ranch, his standing in the community, his concerns about stability and order. He was calm, measured, playing the role of responsible citizen. Until Cole began his questions. Mr. Thornhill, you proposed marriage to my wife Margaret in 1855, didn't you? Victor's face went rigid. That's irrelevant. Answer the question, Judge Hammond said. Yes, I proposed. And she rejected you. Yes. And then she married me. Yes. And you've hated me ever since, haven't you? You want my land not for cattle, but because Margaret is buried there. You want to own the place where she rests. Victor's composure cracked. You don't deserve that land. You didn't deserve her. Mr. Thornhill, Judge Hammond warned. But Victor was past listening, 25 years of suppressed rage boiling over. She should have chosen me. I could have given her everything. But she chose a dirt-poor cowboy with nothing. And now you've got another woman living where Margaret should have been mine. The courtroom erupted. Judge Hammond's gavel came down like thunder. Order, order in this court. Victor seemed to realize what he had said, but it was too late. The mask had fallen. Everyone had seen what lay beneath. Jacob brought Wade Jennings to the stand next the foreman, limping on crutches. Wade testified about the $50 per man, about the arson, about the attack, and then he delivered the final blow. Mr. Thornhill told me if Cole Whitlock died during the operation accidental-like, he'd pay an extra $200, and he'd buy the land from the estate. Conspiracy to commit murder. The words hung in the air like smoke. Blackwell tried to salvage it, argued that Wade was a criminal whose testimony was unreliable. But the damage was done. Victor Thornhill had shown his true face. Judge Hammond called a 2-hour recess. When court reconvened, he had a sheet of paper before him. He read from it in a voice that brooked no argument. I have reviewed all evidence, testimony, and applicable law. My ruling is as follows. First, regarding land title, Mr. Whitlock's 1867 filing is valid. The confirmation by Commissioner Wheeler removes any technical deficiency. The boundary claims raised by plaintiff are unfounded. Cole felt Nayland's hand find his under the table. He squeezed it. Second, regarding the harboring claim, Miss Morningstar is a free citizen who has worked as a contract employee for the United States Army. She is not a fugitive. There is no violation of the Relocation Act. Victor was staring at the table, his face gray. Third, and most importantly, it is clear to this court that Mr. Thornhill's claim is motivated not by legal merit, but by personal animus. This court will not be used as a tool for revenge. The gavel came down once. Plaintiff's petition is denied. Defendant Cole Whitlock retains full title to Cottonwood Creek Ranch. Furthermore, I am issuing a restraining order. Mr. Thornhill is prohibited from approaching Mr. Whitlock's property or person within 500 yards. Violation will result in immediate arrest. Another strike of the gavel. Case dismissed. The courtroom erupted in applause and protest both. But Cole heard none of it. He pulled Nolin into his arms, held her tight, while she trembled with relief and exhaustion and triumph. Marcus was pounding his back. Jacob was grinning. Father O'Malley was making the sign of the cross. They had won. Against money, against power, against the machinery of law, twisted for personal vendetta. They had won. Victor Thornhill left the courthouse before the verdict was even recorded, disappearing into the Tucson streets like a ghost who had finally been exorcised. The journey home took 4 days instead of 3. They were in no hurry now. Let the land wait. Let the cattle manage. They had time. On the second night, camped under stars in the high desert, Cole and Nayland sat apart from the others. The fire crackled low. The wind was soft. What do we do now? Nayland asked. We live, Cole said simply. We rebuild what was burned. We expand what works. We make the land better than we found it. Together. He looked at her, this woman who had walked back into his life with the persistence of water wearing down stone. If you'll have an old cowboy who talks more to horses than people. She smiled. I think I can manage that. When they reached Red River Junction, something unexpected happened. People came out to greet them. Not everyone, not even most, but enough. Rosa stood in front of her store with a hand-painted sign, "Welcome home." Father O'Malley rang the church bell, a sound usually reserved for weddings and holy days. Even Sheriff Hayes nodded respectfully as they passed. The town was not transformed. Prejudice did not evaporate overnight. But a crack had appeared in the wall, and through it light was getting in. At the ranch, they found the work waiting. Always more work. But now there were hands to help. Marcus brought his tools and his strength. Jacob visited when his martial duties allowed. Even a few townspeople showed up, curious about the herbs Nolin grew or needing her medical skills, slowly building bridges through necessity and kindness. 1 week after the trial, a letter arrived, hand-delivered by a boy from town who would not say where it came from. Cole opened it alone, standing by the cottonwood tree. The handwriting was educated but shaky, as if written by a man whose hands were not quite steady. Cole, I spent 30 years hating you for something that wasn't your fault. Margaret made her choice. I should have respected it. You won her heart then, just as you've won this woman's heart now. I hope you protect it better than I could have. I'm leaving Arizona territory. Going back to Texas. Maybe somewhere else I can be the man I should have been. The land is yours. It always was. I just couldn't see past my own pain. VT. Cole read it twice, then folded it carefully. It was not quite an apology, not quite redemption, but it was acknowledgement. Sometimes that was the best a broken man could offer. He showed it to Nolin that evening. She read it, handed it back. Will you forgive him? I don't know, but I can let him go. Over the following weeks, they rebuilt. The burned sections of the corral were replaced with stronger timber. The fence line was extended. They dug a second well deeper and clearer than the first. Marcus helped forge new iron brackets and hinges. The ranch that had been built by two people, Cole and Margaret, was now being rebuilt by many. Nolan's medical practice grew. Every Saturday, people came to the ranch. Cuts and bruises at first, then more serious ailments. A rancher's wife with fever, a child with a persistent cough, an old prospector with infected wounds. Nolan treated them all, accepting payment in whatever form it came: eggs, cloth, labor, sometimes just gratitude. Doc Nolan, they started calling her. She was not a doctor, had no formal degree, but the title stuck anyway. The woman who knew both Apache medicine and Army field surgery, who could set a bone and brew a poultice with equal skill. In early December, a rider came from the south, young Apache wearing a mixture of traditional and Western clothing. He dismounted carefully, approached the porch where Cole sat cleaning his rifle. "I'm looking for Nolan Morningstar," the young man said. "And you are Dakota, her brother." Cole stood, extended his hand. "Cole Whitlock, come in." The reunion between siblings was quiet but profound. Nolan had not seen her brother in 2 years. He was 19 now, taller than she remembered, with their father's eyes and their mother's steady hands. He stayed for a week, learning what his sister had found in this place. On the last day of Dakota's visit, Cole took him aside. "There's work here if you want it. Not much pay at first, but a place to sleep and food to eat, and a chance to build something." Dakota looked around the ranch at the land stretching to the horizon. "I'll talk to the elders at San Carlos, but yes, I think I would like that." When he left, he carried a letter from Nayland to the Reservation Council requesting permission for extended work outside the reservation boundaries. The answer came 3 weeks later. Permission granted. By spring, Dakota was living in the small bunkhouse Cole and Marcus had built. He worked the ranch alongside Cole, learning cattle management and fence repair. In the evenings, he studied English with Nolan, determined to master both worlds the way his sister had. And one day, Jacob Blackwood rode out to visit his father. He met Dakota. They were the same age, both young men finding their way. They became friends, then partners. Within a year, they would open a livery stable together in town, Blackwood and Morningstar, the first Apache-owned business in Red River Junction's history. But that came later. On Christmas Day, 1885, Cole cooked a turkey that Marcus had brought along with potatoes and carrots from Rosa's store. They gathered around the table: Cole, Nolan, Marcus, Dakota, Father O'Malley, a makeshift family built from loss and survival and the simple decision to care. After dinner, Cole asked Nayland to walk with him. She bundled in a wool coat and they went out into the cold night. Arizona winters were mild by most standards, but the air still had bite. There was frost on the grass, and their breath made clouds. He led her to the cottonwood tree. Margaret's grave was peaceful under the moonlight, the headstone gleaming with frost. "I want to show you something," Cole said. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small object. A ring, gold, simple, worn smooth by years of wear. Margaret's wedding ring. Nolan's eyes widened. Cole's voice was rough with emotion. "Margaret wore this for 3 years, from 66 to 69. When she died, I put it away. Thought I'd never give it to anyone again." He lowered himself to one knee joints, complaining but not stopping him. "Nolan Morningstar, you brought life back to this house, purpose back to my days. I know I'm 59 years old. I know I don't have many years left to give you. But the ones I have, I want to spend with you." He held up the ring, his hand trembling slightly. "Will you marry me?" Nolan looked at the ring, at the man kneeling before her, at the grave of the woman who had come before. When she spoke, her voice was thick with tears. "When I was 8 years old, drowning in that flood, I made a promise to myself. If I survived, I would find the man who saved me and give him my life. I spent 19 years keeping that promise. And when I found you, I realized you didn't just save me from water. You saved me from a life without purpose." She knelt down to meet his eyes, level with him. "Yes, Cole Whitlock, I will marry you. Not because I owe you, but because I love you." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting all these years for her hand. They kissed there in the moonlight under the cottonwood tree, with Margaret's blessing, silent but palpable, in the air around them. The wedding took place on February 14th, 1886, Valentine's Day. Father O'Malley performed the ceremony at St. Michael's Church. The building was full, maybe 60 people. Some came out of support, some out of curiosity, but they came. Nayland wore a simple white dress that Rosa had sewn combined with her Apache beadwork shawl, a fusion of both worlds she inhabited. Wild asters were woven into her hair, the same flowers that grew around Margaret's grave. She had picked them herself that morning, a gesture of respect and continuity. Cole wore his best vest, a white shirt Marcus had loaned him, and boots he had actually polished. He stood at the altar feeling both terrified and certain, an old man about to promise forever to a woman half his age, and knowing it was exactly right. Father O'Malley spoke of love that transcends time, of promises kept and lives rebuilt. Then came the vows. Cole, do you take Nalin as your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Nalin, do you take Cole as your lawfully wedded husband? I do. By the power vested in me by the territory of Arizona and Almighty God, I pronounce you husband and wife. They kissed as the church erupted in applause. Not everyone was happy. Mrs. Henderson left before the ceremony ended. A few others followed, but most stayed and some even smiled, and that was enough. The months that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered, cattle prices rose with the railroad's approach. Dakota proved a natural with animals, and numbers both. Nolan's clinic became an established part of the community, her skills indispensable. And in May of 1887, Nayland discovered she was pregnant. Cole was 61 years old. He had given up on fatherhood decades ago, had accepted that his bloodline would end with him. But now, impossibly miraculously, there would be a child. He cried when she told him, sat down at the kitchen table, and wept like he had not wept since Margaret's funeral. Not from sadness, from overwhelming, incomprehensible joy. Are you certain? He asked through tears. I'm a nurse. I know the signs. He stood, pulled her into his arms, held her like she was made of glass. I'm too old for this. You're exactly old enough, she said, laughing. You've had 60 years to prepare. They told Marcus first, then Dakota, then Father O'Malley. The news spread through town like water finding its level. Some people shook their heads, muttered about propriety and age differences, but others smiled. A child born to the couple everyone had tried to separate felt like affirmation, like the land itself approving the union. The pregnancy was difficult. Nolan's work as a nurse had exposed her to dozens of births, but being pregnant herself was different. Morning sickness that lasted until afternoon, fatigue that made her sleep 12 hours a night, and toward the end, the baby sitting so low that walking became a waddle. Cole hovered like an anxious bird, constantly asking if she needed anything, driving her half mad with his concern. But she bore it with patience because she understood. He had lost one wife already. The fear of losing another was always there, a shadow behind his eyes. The baby came on January 15, 1888, during a blizzard that dropped 6 inches of snow on the valley, a rare event in Arizona. The roads were impassable, but Rosa and a nun from the mission had arrived the day before, sensing the time was near. Labor took 8 hours. Cole paced outside the bedroom, Marcus sitting with him, both men helpless in the face of nature's oldest work. Finally, as dawn broke and the storm began to clear, they heard it. The thin, powerful cry of a newborn. Rosa opened the door, smiling. Cole, come meet your daughter. He walked in on shaking legs. Nayland lay in the bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in white cloth. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, and held out the baby. Say hello to Margaret Nayland Whitlock. Cole took the baby with hands that had roped cattle, built fences, and fired rifles in war. But they had never held anything more precious than this. The baby was tiny, 7 pounds, with a shock of black hair and eyes that would probably be dark like her mother's. Her skin was a beautiful middle tone, neither fully Apache nor fully white, but perfectly her own. Margaret, he whispered. Hello, little one. The baby gripped his finger with surprising strength, and Cole fell in love for the 3rd time in his 60 years. First Margaret the wife, then Nalin. Now Margaret the daughter. He sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around Nayland, the other holding their child, and felt complete in a way he had never imagined possible. 5 years later, in the summer of 1893, Cole Whitlock stood under the cottonwood tree with his granddaughter's hand in his. Margaret was 5 years old, bright and curious, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn chin. Her younger brother Thomas was 2, playing nearby, under Nolan's watchful eye. Cole was 67 now. His back hurt most mornings. His hands had arthritis that made winter work harder. but he was happy in a deep, settled way that transcended physical discomfort. "Papa?" Margaret asked, looking at the grave marker. "Who is this?" "That's another Margaret. A woman who lived here before you were born. She was very kind." "Was she your mama?" "No, sweetheart. She was my wife. Before your mama." The little girl processed this, then asked with the directness of children, "Did she mind that?" Cole smiled, remembering that Christmas night when he had proposed by this very grave. "No, I think she would have been very happy." Nadine walked over Thomas on her hip. At 34, she was still as strong and capable as the day she had ridden up to the ranch 7 years ago. Gray strands were just beginning to show in her black hair, badges of wisdom rather than age. "Telling stories?" she asked. "Always." Cole took back Thomas from her, the boy settling easily against his grandfather's shoulder. "Someone has to remember." They stood together under the spreading branches of the cottonwood tree. The ranch around them was thriving. 40 head of cattle had grown to 80. Dakota and Jacob's livery business was successful enough that they were planning to open a second location. Nolan's clinic treated 15 to 20 patients a week, and she had trained 2 younger women as midwives and assistants. Red River Junction had grown too. The railroad had arrived in '87, bringing commerce and people. The town population was over 500 now. Not everyone had changed their minds about Apache people, about mixed marriages, about the old prejudices. But enough had shifted that Nolan could walk down the street without hearing slurs, and her children could play with other children without fear. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was better. That evening, after the children were in bed, Cole sat at the kitchen table with paper and pencil. His handwriting was shaky now, arthritis making the letters uneven, but he wrote anyway. A letter to the future, to whoever might own this land after he was gone. To anyone who reads this someday. This land was not built by one man or one woman. It was built by courage, second chances, and people who refused to let hate win. I saved a little girl 19 years before she saved me. That's how life works. We're all both the rescuer and the rescued. Margaret gave me 10 years. Nolan gave me a future. Together they gave me a legacy. If you're standing on this land reading these words, remember this. You belong here because someone before you chose love over fear. Keep that tradition alive. Cole Whitlock, Cottonwood Creek Ranch, 1893. He folded the letter, sealed it with wax, and placed it in the family Bible where births and deaths were recorded. Someday Margaret or Thomas would read it, and they would understand. Nolan came out of the bedroom, moved behind him, placed her hands on his shoulders. "What are you writing?" "A letter to our grandchildren, so they know where they came from." She leaned down, kissed the top of his head. "They'll know. We'll tell them every day." Cole covered her hands with his. Outside, the land stretched away into darkness, the same land he had fought for, bled for, and nearly lost. But it was still here, still his, still theirs. And under the cottonwood tree, where 2 women with the same name were connected across time, the wind moved through the branches with a sound like blessing. The past and present and future all woven together in this one place, this one family, this one impossible, improbable, beautiful story of how love could bridge any distance if you were brave enough to walk it. The stars came out, filling the sky with light. And in the house on Cottonwood Creek Ranch, a family slept safe, and together proof that some promises, even those made by a drowning child and kept across 19 years, were worth keeping. Always.